This is about orality and ancient culture and the notion of arousal and stimulation, and it's really about kind of what the original love songs in our ancient history, and it's by Eric Havelock from his work Preface to Plato. What did the popularity of the shaped word lead to in ancient Greece? Havelock asserts it was the popular mastery of the shaped word enforced by the needs of cultural memory which brought the Greeks to a mastery of other kinds of rhythm. And so the idea here is that Greeks were super skilled at talking, and this idea of the bard as a kind of rhythmic singer who would put poetry into action, and in doing so kind of retell the cultural history. Um, was this really high form of the shaped word in ancient Greece. What happened to the cultural memory of the people? How did this affect casual speech? The whole memory of a people was poeticized, and this exercised a constant control over the ways in which they express themselves in casual speech. And what I take this to mean is that, like, in ancient culture, nothing was written down, and so to keep it in people's memories, it had to have a very stylized and poetical form of discourse. So a lot of metaphor and a lot of rhyme and a lot of these poetic aspects of language that what he's saying here found their way into everyday casual speech. What did the Homeric epics constitute? Well, Havelock asserts that the Homeric epics, and that would be the Odyssey and the Iliad, constituted a body of invisible writing imprinted upon the brain of the community. They represented a monopoly exercised by the epic technique over the cultural language. Such control had to be linked with functional performance to be effective. And so what he's saying, I mean, there's a lot of 50-cent words here, and it seems kind of complicated, but what he's saying is, the language had to be kind of a very high poetical style, and it was always being performed that way. And so this guy, the bard, right, or the kind of singer of tales, or the poet, right, who would sort of perform the cultural memory, he was a kind of what, like a really pivotal figure in ancient Greece. What are the two technologies of preserved communication known to man? The two technologies of preserved communication known to man, namely the poeticized style with its acoustic apparatus, and that's the spoken word and using metaphors and telling stories, and the visual prosaic style with its visual and material apparatus, and that would be like these words themselves that you're reading. That's the visual prosaic style. Each within their respective domains control also the content of what is communicable. And so in an oral culture, they like the kind of information that could be stored is very different than in written culture. You can just kind of pack away all the information and put it in a box. But in oral culture, it had to fit in people's minds and had to be repeated constantly, and that took the form, according to Havelock, of poeticized language. Again, like lots of metaphors, lots of various like rhetorical tropes, rhyme, and repeated passages, and kind of all the poetic stuff that you learned about in English. Musique is a kind of ancient Greek notion of music, right? So musique as a recognized technique was a complicated convention designed to set up motions and reflexes which would assist what? Havelock asserts, we have adopted the hypothesis that, quite aside from the unconscious pleasure derived from rhythmic bodily motions, musique as a recognized technique was a complicated convention designed to set up motions and reflexes which would assist the record and recall of significant speech. The melody and the dance are thus the servants of preserved statement and are not in the oral stage of culture practiced very much for their own sake. And so again, you have this idea of trying to remember stuff, right? That everything around this kind of crazy performance of the ancient bard was set up, right, in this poetic, dramatic style, so that it would assist the record and recall of significant speech. So here's where Havelock kind of talks about the eroticism that was stimulated by the bard, which, if you think about it, like the ancient bard was the kind of radio and the television and, all the media in one, if you will. So, what did the regularity of the performance do to the body? Havelock asserts the regularity of the performance had a certain effect of hypnosis, which relaxed the body's physical tensions, and so also relaxed mental tensions, the fears, anxieties, and uncertainties, which are the normal lot of our mortal existence. Fatigue was temporarily forgotten, and perhaps the erotic or sexual impulses, no longer blocked by anxiety, were stimulated. It is therefore to be concluded that the recital of the tribal encyclopedia, because of the technology of the recital, was also what? Havelock asserts, it is therefore to be concluded that the recital of the tribal encyclopedia, because of the technology of the recital, was also a tribal recreation. Right? A tribal recreation. And what is that? It's kind of, right, this entertaining, spontaneous, fun, enjoying experience, right? A tribal recreation. The audience found enjoyment and relaxation as they were themselves partly hypnotized by the responses to a series of rhythmic patterns, verbal, vocal, instrumental, and physical, all set in motion together and all consonant in their effect.